What's up guys, welcome back. So 10 cards Konami would maybe ERRATA to bring them back off of the ban list, but as you know, and through experience from past ERRATAs that Konami already put through, is that some cards, the ERRATAs were fine, okay, you pretty much like weakened an old card, but other ERRATAs were flat out terrible to make, like perfect example, let's say Sinister Serpent, Brain Control, just to name a few cards, to make them like pretty much unplayable and not worth to make them competitive again, or at least to use them in competitive decks. So before I get into the top 10 list, a couple of things that I have to mention here to keep at least with this particular list, a couple of things we have to keep track of. And the first one is that, the discussion of ERRATA on cards. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of ERRATAs. I think the biggest reason for that is that I have been playing this game ever since the beginning, like 2004 for me here in Europe. And personally, I'm not a fan of ERRATA, at least of, Konami, like using ERRATA or putting an ERRATA on older cards like Sinister Serpent, Brain Control, again, just to name a few cards. Ring of Destruction again, Crush Card Virus, again, those old school cards here in these situations. I don't like that. You're just neutering like a very old school card, so the biggest factor here, or a big argument for this, is nostalgia. Anyway, so that's like a big debate, right? Anyway, the second thing here is that a couple of cards that are currently banned in the TCG are legal in the OCG. Prime example, for example, here is Excite-A-Night, legal in the OCG. Card Destruction, legal, if I'm not mistaken, in the OCG, while it's banned in the TCG. So it's very unlikely Konami would, Konami TCG would ERRATA a card, bring it back for the TCG ban list, and using two different cards with the same name in both TCG and OCG. So maybe we could consider that as well. And last, before we start, is that the third one here it's something I've mentioned before, is good versus bad ERRATAs. In the past we've had some good ERRATAs, let's say the Chaos Emperor one. Okay, you're neutering a card, same for the Ring of Destruction one. Okay, you're neutering the card to some extent, but still it's somewhat playable. While I look at something like Brain Control or Sinister Serpent, nobody is going to play those cards anymore, right? So, okay, you can do so many things with these old school cards. Without further ado, let's start off with number 10. Number 10, I have Night Assailant, an old school card, currently at 1, I believe both TCG and OCG. Night Assailant was one of the better cards in mainly the Goat format, Chaos format back in 2003/4. The card was also good. I mean, as you remember, right, when it's like discard at Graceful Charity, Card Destruction, Raigeki Break, you could take back any flip monster from your graveyard and add it back to your hand. Not the same copy of Night Assailant, but that's where shit hits the fan, is that if you had another copy of Night Assailant in your graveyard, you could get back that one. So it was basically an infinite loop between at least two different Night Assailants, and that's why, for the most obvious reasons, this card has been put to 1 ever since. So how could you ERRATA this card? Well, I think it's very simple. Just make its effect so that you can't get back like a card named Night Assailant. Well, this again would solve a lot of problems, like you can't switch between both Night Assailants. I might be missing something, but this seems like a very easy solution to bring back, for example, this card. And that's something I haven't mentioned yet, is I think like half of the ban list can easily be solved, like just adding in one sentence, like once per turn, and you would like already fix so many cards here on the ban list. But anyway, so number 10, Night Assailant. Number 9, good old Elemental Hero Stratos. Again, one of the best cards, banned in the TCG, but legal at 2, I believe, in the OCG. It has 2 different effects, right? Again, as I mentioned before, it's not really likely that they will give Stratos an ERRATA, but let's say if they do, maybe make it like a once per turn and then restrict it to either, to one of its effects. Like you can only use one effect for that particular turn. That's already like a big restriction, since now Stratos doesn't have that, and even though it's at 2 in the OCG, it's not really played into. I mean, we saw that the Link deck, the Dark Link deck, most of them only played one copy of Stratos, so maybe it's time to finally bring back Stratos, right? Number 8. Number 8. We have Metamorphosis, also an old school card, a very strong card, let's not forget. A very strong card, like basically turn any level monster on your side of the field into a powerful fusion monster, old school days, like a Cyber End Dragon, Chimera Tech, or Cyber Twin Dragon, right? Very easy to get them on the field. 1000 Ice Restrict are very easy examples. Potentially, but I think the biggest strength of this card is, you know, just facilitate OTKs. Possible restrictions here for a Metamorphosis is maybe as soon as you use it, prevent other special summoning, you know, for the rest of the turn, or the whole turn as soon, or at least in the same turn you use Metamorphosis. I think that's definitely an option, right? Just prevent you from like special summoning for the rest of the turn, or for the whole turn if you use Metamorphosis in that particular turn. Number 7, we have Painful Choice. A couple of years ago it was hinted, right, leaked, supposedly leaked. Painful Choice would return off of the ban list with an errata, but that wasn't true. Well, what are the options, right? Since Painful Choice is definitely one of the best spells ever printed and possibly will never return from the list, right? Unless it might get an errata. A possible restriction is during the same turn you use it, and I'm looking at like Light Sworn decks, Infernoids for example, Burning Abyss maybe, is prevent special summoning again for the rest of the turn or for that particular turn. That's again a huge hinder for, you know, those decks, or ends, right? A couple of options is as soon as you use Painful Choice, before or after, you can't search or add cards from your deck to your hand. So like for example a Troll and Lockbird effect as soon as you use Painful Choice. Again, it's a super powerful card and it needs those restrictions, right? Number 6, Excite-A-Knight. Excite-A-Knight is currently legal in the OCG, but sadly not in the TCG, so how could you solve this card? And that's the power of this card. It's generic and blows up the entire field. If you're in such a terrible position, Excite-A-Knight could bring you back in the duel at a small cost of only having like 2 level 4 monsters. So maybe one restriction or one possible change you could make is not make this card generic for every level 4 monster. Dot deck is make it only summonable with like 2 Elswarm monsters. Again, restricting it to the Elswarm / Evil Swarm, right, archetype. That's again a huge hinder on this card. Number 5, Dimension Fusion, and make it number 4 as well. Return from a different dimension. Again, don't get me wrong, both cards have been involved into shady decks, OTKs, up the... you know what I mean. Doesn't, at least both these cards are superb, are fantastic, special summoning multiple monsters, and in case of Dimension Fusion, at a small cost of only 2000 life points, okay, your opponent will get the special summons as well if they have banished monsters, but still, the prime time of this card, or at least both cards, were like, well, Dragon Rulers to some extent, with Return from a Different Dimension and Dimension Fusion. I'm looking at Magical Explosion, FTK, Teledad, or Dark Armed Turbo decks, right? With Demok pre-errata, by the way. But now, okay, possible restrictions is once per turn, again Dimension Fusion, Return from a Different Dimension, which is of course a much slower version of Dimension Fusion, right? But yeah, again, once per turn, you can only use it once per turn. No special summons for the rest of the turn, that's already a huge hinder. Or maybe, and that's a big one, sacrifice your battle phase. And that's something that, well, maybe might not matter, since, you know, putting multiple monsters on the field is already threatening as well, like Soul Charge, right? But still, this card coming off of the list, it's not really likely, and if this card would ever return, or both these cards would ever return, they need to be murdered, right, with multiple erratas. The next one, number 3, we have Lavalval Chain Prime. This was banned shortly after Infernity's Rite, a very powerful card. Two different effects, sending this pretty much like a Foolish Burial effect, and the stack of your, at least stack your deck right off the top card. Very, very powerful card. Possible restriction once per turn maybe, or maybe if the card sent to your graveyard cannot be used during the same turn it was sent to the graveyard, and maybe make it even worse is also not let it use during your opponent's turn. Like, for example, send Fairy Tale from your deck to the graveyard. You cannot use it during the same turn. It was sent to the graveyard, and also not during that following turn during your opponent's turn. So just an example, right? To somewhat hinder Lavalval Chain, but nonetheless, powerful card, one of the best exceeds ever printed up until now, right, in this game's history. Ooh, the next one. Number 2, we have Northern, one of the few fusion monsters currently banned in our, like, you know, lovely card game. Again, it's still a superb, a very powerful monster, facilitates links, exceed summons, of course, synchro summons. It's again, super powerful card, so a possible errata, maybe make it once per duel, right? So again, it's very easy to summon it to your side of the field, maybe sacrifice your battle phase if that makes if that sounds logical, right? But well, don't get me wrong, erratas don't need to be like they don't need to make sense, right? Same with something like Brain Control. Well, they definitely need to do like neuter it, but still, Northern it's still like a superb card. And then finally, like I have a lot of honorable mentions. We have Firewall Dragon, again, Dandelion, Astrograph Sorcerer, Level Eater, Substitute, Card of Safe Return. All are very easily like neutered if Konami adds the sentence once per turn. Last, here number 1 on my list is Monkey Board. Again, don't get me wrong, this is one of the best pendulums again ever printed. Basically a 1-card scale, search anything, basically anything like Prime Time was the PP Performances and Pals format, and possible erratas for Monkey Board if this card would come back, probably not. But what are possible erratas? Maybe prevent the effect, or at least the monster or the card you searched off of Monkey Board, prevent you from using its effect or getting it on the field, like you searched Joker, for example. Well, you cannot normal summon or special summon or use Joker's effect during that particular turn, for example, right? That's already a huge restriction. Maybe some special summoning restriction. Those are definitely all options, right? But still, 1-card scale is still very, very strong. So did I miss any? What cards could possibly come back with an errata in the near future? Again, like, feel free, since I definitely missed a couple of cards. Okay, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching, and feel free to leave a comment or like if you enjoyed the video. Lithium signing out. Peace.